Hey, my name is Dave, and this is Sicko Podcast.
Yeah, yeah. How's your week been? I know you recently moved into your apartment. How is
Yeah,
that?
it's been a week. I actually just got back to Syracuse from Jersey, and I got a brand new apartment when I came back. Up until now, my experience in Syracuse housing has been very pipe filled and white paint filled. But now I'm living in a nice apartment. I got windows, which is it's much better than my basement apartment I had before. I got
Mhm.
granite countertops, so I'm living life right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a different move because I think you recently moved in with Vanessa, your girlfriend, and yeah, just how is that? You guys have been living together for a while, but
Yeah, I
I
mean, we,
think
we
it's the
made it
first
through the
time.
quarantine test, which is a pretty drastic test. We spent literally 3 months every single day together, and this is the first year of our relationship. So, I mean, now we're in a new apartment together, and it's better than ever. So, honestly, I'm just excited for the change of scenery for sure. I've been looking at the same two walls for the past 3.5, 4 months now, so that's been
Yeah,
really nice. And just I don't know, something about having space like physical space, I think there's some sort of value in your mental space as well, kind of being a bit more open. And I've really
right.
felt that since I've gotten here. Like I'm just happier. I'm excited to wake up and go to my terrace and look out the window. And it's not a bunch of random brick apartments, but rather a really nice infrastructure and really nice theming around my apartment complex. It's just nice. It's one of those things that it's a luxury that I haven't really been able to feel up in here in Syracuse.
Yeah, it's a different move. It's not like a necessity move, like when you're in college or whatever. Just fuck. Let me find a box to live at
I
for
just need a roof over my head and four walls. That's it.
for a couple of semesters. Like this is like, all right, I want this. I'm making choices. This is the scenery I want. This is the environment I want to be in. And
Yeah, and you can tell the difference too, just from passing people in the hallways. Something like when I lived in I don't want to call them bad apartments, but the not quite as nice apartments. Every neighbor's got their own. They got their head down. They got headphones in. Here, it's everybody saying hi to me, and they got dogs and stuff. Like I don't know. It's a whole. To me, it's a whole different vibe than what I'm used to. And it's definitely not uncomfortable. It's very, very welcomed from me at least.
yeah, I think that that's a good point, just in terms of your environment and its effect on your mental health, because that's something that I've been focusing just on myself, just because I know that you know part of the reasons why I may feel a certain way, I may feel down, could be just part of my environment. And there's always that, oh, if I lived here or if I was in this group or community, I'd feel this way, I'd feel a lot better, or that would help and aid in terms of just making me feel good and having a positive, mental or mindset. That actually reminded me. I know you used to have like a lot of like panic attack or anxiety attacks, throughout college, just because of the stress and everything like that. I actually, haven't we haven't talked about this in a while. I don't know if those have like decreased a lot, but I was just wondering in terms of your mental health overall, has it grown? And if it has, what has led to that change?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say because I definitely still do have, the panic attacks. I definitely still, but they're not. I would say they're not as common, and they're definitely more random. Like it used to be, there used to be something that triggered it. I was living in a worse off apartment, so if something broke, that would trigger it, something like that. But I'm finding that the more comfortable places I put myself in mentally, the better off I am mentally as well. So giving myself this space has essentially given me the space to be happier than I used to be, and it gave me the space to work through whatever issues I'm trying to deal with, rather than just kind of be feeling stuck, I guess, in a box with four walls, like we just said, and not really being able to like think outside my own headspace. So it really is valuable for my anxiety, for just generally my mental health, because it allows me to kind of give myself the luxury that I never really gave myself before, which in a way, in and of itself, makes me happier, makes me more motivated to go out and utilize the space that I have around me now.
Okay. Do you think is something that therapy would help with in terms of?
It's tough. Like it's
Yeah.
so I've noticed that I've talked to a lot of people with anxiety as well, be it either very casual anxiety where it just happens every now and then, or very serious anxiety where they're taking medication or whatever it may be. And I will say like therapy is very valuable. I think everybody who is going through some sort of clogged up mental headspace or some decision making process that they can't quite work through, I think they should utilize therapy because that's what therapists are for, to talk out, your feelings, your mentality to an unbiased third party who can also give you advice. But I personally haven't been to therapy in quite some time. But that's also mostly because I've done a lot of like self-teaching techniques as far as like mitigating my anxiety.
Mhm.
Just because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO. I'm working. Like I don't have time for panic attacks anymore, and so I kind of just realized I could either spend my life constantly going to therapy and constantly taking up a solid amount of my week to deal with this anxiety, or I can just practice better practices that help mitigate my anxiety from arising. So putting
Yeah.
myself in a nicer apartment, focusing my career on the things that I want to, not the things that I need, being more financially stable by like spending in more strategic places. Like it's little things, and it could be quote unquote adulting to a degree, but the reality is adulting really does help you kind of take that next step in your life. And I think for me personally, my anxiety hasn't followed me to this next stage of life that much, which is a good
Mm.
thing.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you. And I was just curious, and I was just asking because, you know, I'm on like on a similar, way of thinking, like in terms of therapy. Like shout out to the people who do take therapy and the therapists that, help people and genuinely help people, because I know that that system in itself is nowhere near perfect. I know several people like yourself, like myself, that deal with anxiety and stress and have experienced some form of therapy. Although my experiences are minimal, but my friends that have reached out because of necessity, really. Um, Oftentimes, these programs aren't suited or genuine towards actually helping a person individually speaking. They try to make it a systematic process in terms of,
That's every university in the US. Yeah.
yeah, they try to make it a systematic process, as in, oh, these are the symptoms, 3 out of 6, 3 out of 10, you fit through. Here's the
Yep.
medication, and here's your diagnosis. When
Literally
and
gatekeeping mental health.
Yeah, they're not looking like people who seek help aren't looking for a diagnosis or to be called, sick in the head or anything like that. It's more so teach me the skills that I need in order to better my own mind state.
Yeah.
Um, there was a time, I think it was sophomore year or something. I got in trouble in campus, and part of the mandate for drinking, actually. And part of the mandate was they was like, all right, go do some therapy. You have 3 mandatory sessions or some shit like that. And only the therapist can release you. So you gotta take it seriously, quote unquote. And that was my first time ever dealing with a therapist. And I didn't like I wasn't even like going through anything. I was just going because they told me. So I go to the therapist, and then she's just sitting there. She's like, all right. And that's all she said. And I was like, what is she expecting here? Like, does she want me to just talk? And at first I was like, what do I even talk about? Like, what are the steps? So I asked her, and then she just started asking questions like trick questions or trap questions, like, oh, how's life at home? Like
The one thing, it was funny because it always ends up coming back to the parents. Every time I've gone to a
right,
therapist, I never really knew what to talk about because I feel like my anxiety is more like a subconscious where things don't typically give me anxiety, but they probably just kind of sit back there and boil up until panic attack.
right.
And yet every time I talked to a therapist, they would pry as if there was one or two like individual things that were bothering me, and that was the cause. And if we just fix that cause, then you'd be fine, you'd be cured. And I hated that mentality because it always came back to like, well, it sounds like your dad's putting a lot of pressure on you. Oh, it sounds like your mom's asking a bit too much of you. And it's like, nobody's putting this pressure on me. Nobody's asking me to do it. Like, it's my brain, it's my mind making these active decisions. And when I went to therapy, my goal was to just be able to talk out my mentality and have somebody just kind of listen and give me an unbiased response to the things that I'm thinking about on an everyday basis. But instead, they tended to want to break it down into this like cause effect sort of situation where to me it never really felt like that. So, there's very, very large positives and benefits to going to therapy because it's a phenomenal place to talk out your feelings and get a response from a third party. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you to like kind of change your own mentality to a degree. And that's a very hard lesson to learn because I mean, when I was in my peak anxiety days, all I wanted was for somebody to give me a magical pill that would just erase all my anxiety. But I realized that that's not going to work and it's not going to happen. So the best thing I can do is put myself in a better mental headspace and a better mental health space by myself. Because at the end of the day, I'm the only one that really knows what's going on in my head. And if I can kind of try to figure that out to a degree and kind of find out some solutions, and that's all I really needed. And that's what I've kind of just been building upon over the past 3, 4 years of just learning my own anxiety, learning my own mentality, and trying to just find solutions for it.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with that because it's the reason why, we have to rely on ourselves most of all while we're our number one supporters is because the system of, of mental health is not perfect and nowhere near. Like, I think that, genuine, like very professional and good therapists are not common. Um, at all because of some of the things you mentioned in terms of, oh, the reason why you're so anxious about college because the stress that your parents put on you or your mom or your dad. Like, no, what if it's I'm just anxious about this, and maybe it's because I am putting too much on my plate and
Mhm.
worrying about
And
graduating in 4 years when it's okay not to graduate in 4 years. It's okay to graduate in your own time and take your own path. And I have to realize that for myself. Um, it's just there's not a lot of listening going on. It's more so just listening for
exactly.
certain things.
Listening for keywords, key indicators, like, oh, we got him. Like, don't worry, guys, we got him. He said mom at least 3 times in that sentence, so it's got to be
Yeah,
his. Like,
Yeah,
and
exactly. You could tell it's the education system in terms of however, a therapist becomes certified and gets a degree. You could
Mhm.
tell that there's a lot of emphasis on these extremes and on these A and B things when people are complex. Like, I learned about complex characters in fucking in middle school when I was when I was reading these novels that had, statements and different types of characters, and like, oh, a complex character is a character with many layers that's not necessarily good, not necessarily bad. It's a mixture of all of these things. So that makes them more difficult to understand and therefore more human. And so, a therapist's goal should never be to understand and find the direct cause of a problem. It just should be just to help them, become more like you decided to become, provide them with the tools in order to get themselves out of these pockets without the need of a therapist.
Yeah,
Um,
and you even said it before. It could just be many times it is stress that someone's just putting upon themselves. It's and a lot of it comes from social pressure, but it's still your own mentality kind of making you feel like you have to be behaving a certain way or progressing at a certain rate or doing something in a certain capacity that doesn't quite fit with the way that you want to live your life. And I feel like also breaking out of this mold of like, oh, you have to have a job right after college, and then you have to have kids by this time and be married by this time. A lot of that is, I mean, that's social pressure, but a lot of people put it on themselves once they are aware of that social pressure and they sort of feel bad about themselves. And that eats at you too. I know many people that were very stressed about the idea of graduating college in 4 years. Oh my God, what if I need an extra semester, an extra year? And who cares? That sure, like 90% of the people in your class, they're going to graduate in 4 years. Great for them. No one knows if they're going to get a job. No one knows if they do get a job if they're going to like it. Maybe they'll live the rest of their life in a position that they never wanted to because they didn't graduate school in the capacity that they really truly wanted to. And so I always tell people to just like take your time with decisions like that. Work through your mentality when you feel like you're stressed. Like there's something to be said about a cause and effect because there probably is an underlying issue, but it's not the only sole issue. So if you only try to solve your mental health by picking and choosing small inconveniences in your life and correcting them, you're never really going to heal yourself. You're just going to push away the clearest options as far as what you could mitigate to reduce your anxiety. But there's going to be more. There always will be.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's just a journey that we all take for the rest of our lives. And don't get me wrong, like the people who the people who are like actually depressed and we've all learned over the past couple of years as mental health awareness has gotten more viral and trending as a topic that it's real. Like some people can't control these thoughts and those people do need help and do need just that mental health system in terms of going to a therapist for however long they need to. I'm just what I really hate is just that the fact that the system is broken and people like us who aren't necessarily diagnosed with depression and do have the ability to and mindset to, all right, this isn't working for me, I'm gonna take this on myself. That it's hard for them. I've seen that with close friends that struggle with that and still struggle with that. It's just it's tough. It's tough. Like you just imagine if I don't know, anytime you got a headache and your Tylenol didn't work or some shit like that. Like you can't just be like, all right, let me just sleep more, whatever. If I'm diagnosed with migraines and all these different institutions have solutions that don't work, it's fucked up. It's
Yeah.
fucked up. But yeah.
And if you look at like the worst of it is in university areas. I mean, you see students. What is there? 11,000 students at Syracuse, right? I believe there's about three, four. I could be wrong, but there's definitely no more than 10 counselors at Syracuse University.
Mhm.
Yeah, are you expecting 1,100 students to go into a counselor's office every single year? And even if all of them, let's say, not everybody struggles with mental health. So let's say even a third of that, that's 300 people you have to manage throughout the year per person. So, or per counselor, I should say. So at the end of the day, like there's no real clear answer, both from a university perspective or from any broader societal perspective or institution, I should say, because at the end of the day, everybody's different and everybody has individual needs, be it a 3 hour long therapy session or just a 15-minute pep talk. So it's one of those. I feel like mental health is still very early in the stages of figuring out exactly what the causes and the solutions are to it. I think because we're becoming more aware of the fact that mental health is a very real thing. So I think we're just going to get better over time. But right now, it's certainly broken, and it's broken at some of the most important institutions in our country and generally in our world. So kind of just we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of things are broken and it's very tough to fix. It's very tough to fix. Not just mental health, like with Syracuse, so many different I was talking to Jawan yesterday and
I
and
just
he
want
he was telling me of just his struggle uh in Syracuse. Um because he took a leave of absence, right? And yes, first he wanted to switch majors early on, and that's already a struggle because in order to switch major, you have to go to a different school, and in order to get into a different school, you have to fit in a certain requirement, which I think is dumb in general. Because if I'm accepted into a university, and this university has several different schools under it, I'm still a student of that university. Therefore, I should be able to interchange anytime I want.
Well, I know that depends on the university as well.
Right.
Uh, Vanessa had told me in Florida State, like she transferred from law school to Newhouse, and it was a very tough process to just go from one school to the next in Syracuse. But at FSU, she said if you wanted to transfer, you sent in a form, and they were just like, okay, cool, you're in this major now, pick your class. So I think it does depend on the university, and Syracuse does fall behind a lot in especially the communication and the interoperability between the schools on campus.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that goes back to, a lot of the schools in Syracuse, there's some really good ones and there's some really not very good ones. And I think that makes it tough too, because if you get accepted into a school that's generally easier to get accepted into on the university, and then try to transfer into one that's generally much harder to get into, then what do you do?
He was trying to transfer into the liberal arts and science school, which I don't think should be
From what?
difficult at all to even do so. Like especially like in his case, right? I forget what major he was in, but he didn't like it, and of course, he didn't like it, and he didn't do well as a result. And and then he realized I'm not doing well because I don't like it. Let me get myself out of this situation. However, because of these requirements that they had, these GPA requirements that they had, just to get into the liberal arts school, he was stuck basically. And his advisor wasn't of much help because we were talking about faculty. You were mentioning that in mental health, they only have like maybe 10, 11 counselors in Syracuse. For the advisor that he needed it was only one person for everybody. There's I forget what type of
Everyone
faculty.
in the arts and sciences school?
No, not in the arts and sciences school.
Uh,
For the particular advisor or whatever is involved in terms of who to reach out to for the appeal in order to do something because he needed an appeal to get more money. Oh, it was the what's the shit? Financial aid advisor.
Gotcha.
There's only one in all of Syracuse, right? So he was stuck. He couldn't transfer out. So he was stuck in the major. He didn't do well. He decided to take a leave of absence and is now trying to take was trying to take summer classes. But he didn't get the financial aid he needed, so he wanted to make an appeal. Obviously, before taking the summer classes, but because there's only one financial aid advisor and uh, advisor, he reached out to the department. He was like, "Hey, can I talk to so and so? Oh, she's on vacation." Like he's
Are
like,
we?
I need to figure out if I need to figure out about this financial situation now before I take these classes. So because I need to make an appeal. So we don't want to step on her toes. She's on vacation. Reach out in 2 to 3 weeks when she's back. So now he's taking the classes. He owes money, but he's not going to pay for it yet because he's trying to get this financial situation figured out. He finally talks to her once, explain the situation, and then she's like, "All right, just write an appeal, and I'll represent it. I'll present it to the court or whatever." And he was like, "Is there any way I can present myself or be there as well?" She's like, "No, that's not that's not a thing." So he only met her one time. He wrote a letter of appeal. So how is she gonna successfully or genuinely advocate for him in the court as his representation? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So he got denied. And in order to make a second appeal, he can't use any of the information he did in the first appeal. But the
Like
information in the first appeal is literally what is why he needs the money.
that's
So
crazy.
it's just
It's amazing how you think of, and I was thinking about this the other day too, just generally, but I'm going to get a bit specific on it.
yeah.
Like you look at institutions like Syracuse that have been around since 1881, right?
Mhm.
We had 140 years to figure out an advising process, a mental health process. Like, given, yes, obviously before probably about 40 years ago, there wasn't mental health, and a lot of advisors didn't have the amount of students that they have nowadays. But the inability for Syracuse and other institutions to scale up their resources along with the scale up of students that they're accepting into their institution, it's borderline. I mean, it's irresponsible at the very least because you're essentially saying we're going to keep bringing in more students, get more money, but that money's not going to be reinvested back into the students. It's going to be invested in Syracuse's case, a new sidewalk and a new gym and a new student center and a
Yep.
new football stadium roller coaster looking decoration. Have you seen the new thing on the dome yet?
I haven't. I heard it's insane.
ridiculous. It's such a it serves no purpose. I don't understand what the point of it is. It looks like a giant roller coaster was just placed on top of the dome, and they got rid of the iconic dome for it. Like I want to know what benefits it has and why Syracuse thought, out of all the things it could have invested in, that that was the one that had to happen.
At,
Maybe the dome was falling apart. I don't know,
at
but all
this
I
at
know
this
is it
rate,
seems
we're gonna have like a basically a huge amusement park in campus,
I mean, at
and they're
least
gonna have a
one
separate
roller coaster.
admission
Like
fee.
the thing's just a wavy decoration that's just huge. Like if they at least could have made it interactive, could have made it fun. No, it's just a pole with bigger poles on it. That's all it really is.
Come to so and so campus because we have a Six Flags type roller coaster partnership. It only costs you 30,000 more in your tuition.
And you can only see it on certain parts of campus, and you can never ever ride it.
it's 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 so stupid because to your point, like when we see these like organizations like Syracuse, when they're determined to get something done, they will get it done regardless of who asks. Like nobody asked really for them to redo Archibald Gym. It was already
Like
huge.
30 years ago.
Yeah, it was already huge and it was perfectly fine. But
Yep.
they said, nope, we're going to do a whole project, shut Archibald down a whole year, and they got it done. Like if they had that same energy to increase the amount of advisors, make sure that these advisors are actually doing their job well, because a lot of times they're not. Ensure that there's proper representation for different minority groups and shit like that, because the whole not again SU movement, it's it shouldn't have even come up anywhere near that, because the not again SU movement began really out of frustration. It's like, okay, we're going to trust the process in terms of racial incidents occurring or et cetera, et cetera. We're going to see how the system does it. And then the university is very good at, listening and saying they'll do better, but they're very bad with action. And not enough action is what prompted not again SU. So, just in terms of, you know, it's 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 not funny, I guess. I guess it's interesting that not again SU really popped off after we graduated. That's when the movement really uh, gained some climate. And then at the heat of it, the university was saved, I guess, by quarantine because that stopped most of the protests or the direct protests. But then, a few months later, there's another spark throughout the country and throughout the world. So it's sort of an indication of not again SU was sort of like a prompt indication of we're enough of the bullshit, we're upset, and we're gonna disrupt through protest.
Well, I mean, at universities and institutions generally all over the country, they face the same problem. People face the same problem. It's that you ask for change and they'll tell you that they'll meet you halfway and then they don't do anything. And that has happened here at Syracuse many, many times. I mean, we've seen it in our past 4 years at Syracuse, and I saw it when I was trying to help the students at the Not Again SU protest. I mean, all we had were bags of food and water for these students doing a sit-in, and there were cops turning us away. Officer Friendly, by the way, DPS officer, that's super friendly, super nice guy. He was
Yeah.
the guy who turned me away. I had food in hand for kids, and he said, "I'm just following orders." So the problem is when students gather like this and they try to make demands, it's very, very effective and it's very righteous and it's very noble. But the university knows from their perspective that the leaders of that group, the seniors of the school, they're graduating this year, and the people after them, they graduate next year. So in order to keep a movement alive at a university like Not Again SU, you have to literally train the generation under you to continue that movement. And that's a very hard cycle for a student body to really undertake, especially with everything else going on in the university. So it's just, you see these institutions almost taking advantage of the system that say they set in place. They're happy that these students are graduating so they don't have to hear them next year. They're happy that quarantine happened so that they can stop the protests without actually having to get ugly. Like it's I don't even know the word. Like, I'm at a loss for words. 'Cause I've been discussing this a lot with a lot of different people, and how these institutions treat particularly black students and black Americans generally, and even international students. I mean, like everybody who's not a blue-eyed white guy on campus like I am has some sort of threat of financial repercussions or suspension or whatever it may be that I'll never experience.
Hmm.
And that's been a struggle for me for the past 4 years while I was an undergrad, was looking at the friends that I've made and looking at people that I've become closest to, and knowing that it takes one or two very unfortunate incidents to really completely ruin their life. And I could say this, like the same thing could happen to me, but it just happens to happen more frequently to people that don't look like me. And that's something that I've become more aware of over the past 4 years, and have been trying to fight against for the past 4 years, 5 years. And it's just, it seems like there's not really going to be much change until I'm able to put myself in a position where I can be the person that creates that change.
Hmm.
Because at the lowest level, while it's noble and while it should continue to happen, there's not much change that happens at the bottom. It happens right at the top. But the change at the bottom starts when the people start protesting. And that moves up to the administrator, who moves up to the chancellor, who moves up to the next person. It's all about creating a scale of change. And it does start at the bottom, but I want to be where the real change is. And I've realized that because as a blue eyed white man, as I said, I have the unfortunate power in the room to do so in most cases that a lot of people don't. So I don't want to get all white knighty or anything, but I just mean to say that, you know, it's, if you look like me, if you're somebody who looks like me and has had the privileges that we've had, you have sort of a social responsibility to go back and utilize that privilege in powerful positions to make the change that you know is righteous and you know is actually justice. And so, to that degree, it's tough too, because you don't want to, like I just said, you don't want to be the white knight guy, the guy that came in. Don't worry, guys, I got this. The white guy's got this again, because it can't be that every time, and it shouldn't be that every time. But it's a difficult discussion, especially for white people, where you say fuck white people, and you have the white people that understand that we're talking about the white people, but those same people are the ones that are offended. And then they say, oh, they hate all white people. And it's like, no, we don't hate all white people. We just hate you white people because you guys are messing our reputation up as regular as white people. So it's just everything that's been happening the past few weeks has been both heartbreaking but not shocking. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's what we really need to fix, is this type of stuff needs to be shocking. It needs to be out of the ordinary, because if it isn't, then we're very obviously doing something wrong. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's just my little rant on systematic racism, I guess.
No, no, I really appreciate it, and you unpacked a lot of points that I want to get into. Basically, but to your first point on the Syracuse or institutions, colleges that have racist things going on, but aren't actively fighting against it because they know the people graduating, the people fighting it are going to graduate, and then the next are going to graduate, and there really has to be a protest that is taught and sort of inherited by the previous class. And with Not Again SU in particular, I think that they're sort of leading that by example because
Mhm.
they have a social media presence. They are posting their presence online. They are growing an established following. And I think that there's alums that are following. There's the previous class that is following. So it's really just that right there. If every minority or protest organization followed Not Again SU's movement, Not Again Albany, Not Again U Albany, Not Again Harvard, and just have these systems in place, I feel like that will make the protest live on and hopefully keep being a pain in the ass for these faculty members that will be working there for years to come, right? And to your second point, which I think is very important, in terms of just realizing that your fight is not the minority fight as a white man, and utilizing basically your privilege or your power in defense or in aid as an ally, but at the same time recognizing that just an ally, not a white knight. I don't want hugs and kisses from African children for, for basically saving them. Like, there's been like several movies that have done parodies like that. Like, oh, it's a movie about some minority kids in a bad neighborhood, and that white teacher comes on.
Yeah, the white kid from Wisconsin comes to save the whole town. Don't
Oh,
worry.
Mr. Jackson. And at the end, it's like, thank you, Mr. Jackson, like that type of shit. It's none of that. That's not what we're asking, white people to do. Like, we're asking our white allies, one, not to be offended when we call people Karens or when we say fuck white people. We're really just talking about fuck racist white people.
Yeah,
And
and the
and
non-racist white people know that. So
yes, none.
that's what I've recognized too, is that if you're somebody who's white and you're not recognizing that, you're likely one of the racists. Like that's I've definitely labeled people like that, and as they should, because at the end of the day, if you're not recognizing racism in a form that you can literally see, then you're blinding yourself to it, and you
Yeah,
should be guilty of being racist because you're actively choosing to not be aware of the racism around you, which is
yeah,
just
man. Yeah, man.
against.
I've seen that with you, just in terms of like you yourself have gotten mad. Like, you've gotten madder than me in almost many situations of racism. And
Because they make,
really,
it's something about like there's something to be said where I'm looking at another white guy and I'm like, man, you're making me so angry because you look like me and you have the worst opinion I've ever heard. So now my opinion is represented partly by you.
mm,
You're now partly representing my opinion as a white man, and I
mm,
hate your opinion. So I need your opinion to go away so that the normal people, the normal white people of society, can just get along with everybody, which is the plan all along.
yeah, yeah. I think this is a conversation that isn't really had a lot, because for non-racist white people, you're put in a difficult position, right? In terms of, yes, I'm an ally, but I can't be mistaken for the antagonist or the enemy because they're misrepresenting my views. Like, just like black people as a whole or minority people as a whole are seen and have a particular stereotype. On the flip side, there's the white stereotype, and there's a lot of negative ones, and the positive ones are also negative because privilege and shit like that is
Exactly.
not something to be applauded for. It's it's a indication of all the bullshit that's gone down throughout the years, right?
Yeah.
I have a question. When I don't think I ever asked you this, but when did you realize that you had some privilege first? When did you first like really realize that?
I feel like it was a culmination of a lot of small instances because I feel like this happens with a lot of white people too. What I'm about to say, where I've definitely recognized places where I had my privilege prior to being aware of it, and then once you're aware of it, you look back and you're like, wow, I got away with a lot of shit. Like, and that's a feeling that I feel like a lot of white people resonate with because whether you're aware of it or not, like we get away with a lot of shit, and we get to do shit that a lot of minorities in this country don't have the opportunity to do. And so I would say, but like the one instance I can remember of really recognizing my privilege was when I don't know if you remember. I don't. There's been a lot of instances where like we've walked back together, or I've walked behind a group of be it you or like Christian or Bree or Brooke, where I've seen a cop pull closer, like trail us, and like I would look at them and then they'd go away. And like not to say like, oh, don't worry guys, I got this, but more of like a like they genuinely might have been following you guys strictly because you were minority students and then left because I was a white guy. And as small as an instance as that is, and like as many times as you guys probably didn't notice it at all, but I very much noticed it, like that's where I really recognized it because it was like they say microaggressions and people get all upset about whether microaggressions are real or not. I would consider that a microaggression. I would consider a police officer trailing you guys for no reason besides likely your color of your skin and then leaving because he sees that a color of his skin that he approves of is there. So don't worry about it. Now I can go on my day. Like that's where I really recognized it. And there were a lot of like bigger instances on Syracuse campus as well. But it's the smaller ones that really get to me. And that's what really made me aware because anybody can see a big problem. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of awareness to see a small problem. And small problems are the most dangerous ones because they boil up. And when there's a million small problems, they can be bigger than the biggest big problem. And like that's the real problem. That's the real issue is being able to identify those smaller instances of racism and calling them out for what they are.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I would call that even a macroaggression, right? Because if
Yeah,
you're just following a group of people of color for no reason, that's more than micro. But
yeah,
that's a good point because just in the community in general, that's even that has turned into a joke just because it's real. Like, oh, if you're going somewhere, pick a white guy.
yeah. Big white-
If you're driving, if you're on a road
protest.
trip, pick a white guy to drive and shit
They
like
had a protest, a line of white guys like in front of the black protesters, and
that.
like as funny as it is, like it's funny because you're like, oh wow, the line of white guys. But at the end of the day, it's probably in some way affecting the cops' ability to act, or at least changing their perspective of the
Yeah,
protest.
I heard about that. I talked to Taylor, who is like one of the leaders of the Not Again SU movement. That'll be dropping soon, or probably already dropped by the time this does. But she was just telling me about exactly that, the white allies, they call it the white wall, or some shit like that. And I was just laughing because I couldn't believe it. Like I wish I could have seen it, but just the fact that that's necessary is actually like horrible.
Yeah,
And one of besides even the cops, to stop the cops having that line of white people, it was also to stop this particular reporter or something like that. Her name is Justine. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's just this white woman who loves to disrupt discourse, and she's very right wing, um, and she loves to set her own narratives. If there's a protest, she'll come with a camera and try to catch an instance of a moment and headline that and twist it. And she's done that before, and that has led to like death threats to the people in that protest because her followers would see that and just run with it. And and the white ally wall is is used against her on several occasions. Like, what are you recording? I'm not gonna do it here. Like
yeah.
that type of shit. So it's just funny. It's just funny. But back to like the bigger, just white people using their privilege and to aid the protest. I think that's very important, and I'm glad that you recognize that it's not an attack against you, and you don't take offense to it. But honestly, because even I have thought this. Just the same, like when people say like "fuck the police," and when people say fuck white people, which I don't think it's really said as much, right? In terms of publicly, like fuck white people, it's more so like jokes,
Yeah,
like um, like Karen or Bob or white people shit, like
yeah.
that. Those type of trends, which are very popular amongst even white people, and shit like that. Do you think that? Do you ever feel offended or not offended, but do you ever feel like that's not positive discourse in terms of uh, just that? Because I've thought of that myself, and I'm flip floppy many times, just like with my own opinion.
'Cause
Like,
that's a good question. Like, because discourse plays a really large role in how a society behaves, even more so than a lot of people recognize. The way that you talk about something in a society, the way that we speak about anything is all that we have. So when you speak about something in a certain capacity, that capacity is now the one that is most defined on that group of people or whatever else you chose to define. So, but when people say, fuck white people, I've never been offended because the assumption is either A, like we're saying fuck white people because we don't season our meat, we don't do like there's a lot of shit that white people do that I say fuck white people because like come on, we
yeah,
didn't figure this shit out in hundreds of years. And then there's also fuck white people where it's fuck all the racist white people, fuck white people for putting me in this position, for putting my people in this position, for creating systems that are meant to not be broken out of. Like that's fuck white people. that's how I typically hear fuck white people, because at the end of the day, I can look around my immediate network, right? And 50 to 70% of them have just negligent awareness, or non-awareness, I should say, to everything that's going on. And when you bring it up, they'll say two talking points about Trump or some random topic that has nothing to do with what you're trying to talk about.
Mhm.
And then they'll call you a snowflake, or they'll say you're overreacting. And it's those kind of people where, like that make I say fuck white people, because it's like, fuck white people. How are you not even beginning to listen to the conversation, let alone understand what the problem is? And so I think, but that's taught. It's taught through generations of ignorance and generations of assuming that we're meant to be the top dog or the top race, or whatever the heck racists used to define ourselves as. And to that degree, and that's why I've never really taken offense to it, because if somebody like you or somebody like any of our friends were to say fuck white people, in a million years, I would never be like, oh my God, they hate me. No, like that'd be a ridiculous thing to think. Like that's a very simple mind that brings you to that conclusion. And I think people need to start thinking about these types of topics with the layers that are actually there. And you can't just take things at face value. So fuck white people isn't saying fuck all white people. It's saying fuck these white people. Fuck the police isn't saying fuck everybody who's a cop. It's saying fuck the policing system. Like that. And I think it comes down to an education issue, I think, more so than anything. But that's a whole different conversation that we can have. But
Mhm.
also just the education within someone's own family. My parents raised me to be friends with everybody and be aware of the differences between me and other people, but don't use them against myself or other people.
Right.
And that was a really good lesson for me that I didn't fully understand until I got to college and recognized how many different people there were from me and how much privilege I had compared to a lot of others. And so, but I have immediate family who grew up with my aunts or my grandma or whoever it may be, and they have completely different views on a very radical end where it's, I can't believe they're saying fuck white people, and I can't believe they're saying fuck the police. Like, who's going to come save them when they're in danger? And it's like, you just don't get it. Like, you literally do not understand what the problem is. And it's because you never learned to identify problems in that capacity. No one ever taught you to look at people differently. They taught you to treat everybody the same, but not everybody's the same.
Mm.
We should be treating each other with equal love and equal care and equal respect. But that doesn't mean that everybody needs to be treated exactly the same way. It just means at the very basic necessity of being a good person, you should be being a good person to everybody.
Yeah.
And people get that message tripped up very, very often, especially white people, because I don't see color as a big argument that they have. And it's like, yeah, you do. Like, you can't lie. Like, we all see color. So either you're colorblind, you're telling the truth, or you're just being ignorant. And there's no in between.
Mm. I think those are very that really hit it on the mark, because it's sort of like, especially if I don't see color, that's not what we're asking you to do. And
Yeah.
just in terms of treating everybody equally, that's really not what you should do when it comes to people of color, because it's not an ecosystem. It's like, for my audio engineers there, like there's no like equalizer. Like, you can't just put an equalizer across all people, where the people who are disenfranchised down here, you just bring them up, and the people who are up here, you just bring them down. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
no.
if I had employees and I told my marketing team to develop a software application and told my development team to run a marketing campaign, that I'd be treating everybody equally, because everybody has equal jobs, everybody has equal opportunity to do the jobs that I need done. But at the end of the day, I see them differently, because I know in one capacity they're meant to do this, and in another capacity they're meant to do that. And so to pretend like people don't see differences like that in society, where we have to be caring for African Americans in a different capacity because of what white people traditionally have done to them, and how we have to look at white people and the privileges that they have, and how we can, without offending the way that society functions, in a way, hand off that privilege to minority communities that have been ravished by the history of white racists. Like, there are solutions that are out there, and there are ways that people can be thinking about this in a productive manner. The issue is we spend so much time arguing over whether it's a problem or not, that we never actually come to a solution. And that's it. The polarization in this country is the biggest problem, really, because this could be a meaningful conversation that we as a country could be having and yet we are arguing over whether Black lives or all lives matter when it's the same goddamn thing. Like it's just it doesn't make any sense. And it's all because people want to fight. People are afraid of change. They're afraid of people that don't look like them. They're afraid of the liberal left wing brainwashing media. Like it's amazing to me how fearful people in this country are. And it makes me sad because we shouldn't be a country full of fear. We should be a country full of hope and dreams. That's what America used to stand for. And yet we elected in a bumbling idiot who can't do math, can't speak in public, can't fucking do basic ass things, let alone be the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And these people just blindly support him because it's, fuck the other side, fuck the left. They don't even know who they're voting for. They have
Yeah.
no idea. And
Yeah.
yet we'll continue to vote for him because he puts out good talking points and he continues to say that nothing will change. We're just going to go back to being great. If you don't change, you're never going to be great again. And that's the reality that people don't see. And it's because we're too busy fighting to open our eyes.
Yeah, yeah. Throughout my podcast, I've been asking, or I've asked recently, just are minority groups too understanding? And really, just because of like everything that you just mentioned, like we understand that to the measure, like we get it. In terms of just like being white, and we get that you may not be educated, and that may not be your fault because it's a system. It's a systematic racism affects the minority groups negatively, but it doesn't. It protects or shields, a certain community from having access, or actually the whole community from having access to that knowledge that it is there, and this is how it's there, and this is how it affects these groups, and this is what has been done in the past and this is the evidence of systematic racism from Reagan to just the beginning of America, right? Because history is written in the eyes of the oppressors, and in the eyes of the people who've won the fight.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. Like as the majority of the people in the country, in the world, like just growing up, not being taught about racism, you think everybody's equal. Oh, they're just complaining for no reason. I did this, and I, got this job, and I've never been in jail. This cop let me go for warning, and I didn't do it again. You got your warning, right? So why are you doing it? Because it's just these assumptions that are there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of breaking and rebuilding, which is very tough to do for anyone. And we understand that, especially if you're raised under and in an ignorant family. It's very difficult to break out of that mindset of your family and realizing, wait a minute, grandma, uncle, they're not right. I shouldn't think this way. So because of that, because the minority community understands that, I think that's why, you know, uh, MLK, just in terms of the civil movement, really emphasized peaceful protest. Of course, there were other ones, but just in general, from that whole civil movement, peaceful protest is what was brought out of that. Even though there's several movements that weren't as peaceful that led to change, like the riots that happened after the assassination of MLK, that
Mhm.
led to a majority of the changes now. Um, it's it's that peaceful protest, and really why it's emphasized and praised by minority communities, by white people. Uh, it's due to that understanding. Minority communities peaceful protest peacefully and have been because we understand that hey, it's not entirely your fault, white person. You are under the system too. It's just to your advantage, and you don't know that. Let me try to teach you. So there's that,
But
and
I
I
also think that, like, I don't know, white people have had the time, Like if I don't know. I think from my perspective, I see generations of my own family that hold these racist values and they teach them to their children. And even if their children don't fully absorb them, they at least have some sort of implicit bias now because of the words of their parents. And so it's not going to change as quickly as we need it to. It needs to change because
exactly.
I mean, listen, this doesn't affect me in the slightest, and even I'm getting sick of it. I can't imagine if you're a Black American right now or any American of minority descent in this country, and you must be fucking tired of it, like beyond tired of it. And I'm like, I saw this thing on Facebook. It was like, if you're tired of hearing about racism, imagine how tired it is to feel it every day. And like, that's the reality. And at some point, we have to say as a society, are we just going to continue waiting another 100, 200 years for Black people to not get shot down by our own cops? Or are we going to do something about it? And I think that's why this, like the past riots and the past protests in particular, have almost reached like a boiling point because like we're reaching that boiling point. It's getting close. Like, people are getting sick of this. We're having the same conversation every single year, 2 years
Yep.
about the same exact problems that nobody, then all these smart politicians and all these lawyers, but God forbid, nobody can find an answer. Like, that's just impossible. There is an answer out there. Everyone knows there is. Politicians know they are. So what's the issue? And the issue is it's not going to change unless you force change. And I
Yes.
think that we're going to see. I think the next time that this a really big nationwide murder by a police officer by a white supremacist happens, I don't know. I think we made a boiling point as a country, which is going to be a very scary time. Hopefully, it happens after Biden gets into office because he'll do a much better job of handling it. But if
Yep.
Trump's in office and that happens again, we could see a second, maybe not civil war to the scale of the 1800s, but you could see a real civil unrest in this country coming to a very violent climax and really just.
That's yeah. That's just where I was getting to, because of this understanding by minority groups, it has led to this point. The boiling point has been extended, has been higher and higher every time,
If it
right?
started at 120, it's at 500 right now. Like
Right.
we're
Just
definitely.
because of what we mentioned in terms of, we understand it's generational. Your parents are teaching you this. And as a result, you have this unbiased racism and you're attacked and feel attacked and you don't live through it. But now, that we're getting closer to that boiling point, it's like, listen, that's not acceptable anymore. Our understanding has minimized, right? You're either an ally or you're not, and a correct ally, or you're against the movement. Like, being white and neutral is not acceptable
Yeah.
anymore. Take some action.
Unacceptable. I have cut many people off in my life over the past 3 weeks because of their terrible, disgusting view. Like, if you're silent when there's oppression, then you are no better than the oppressor themselves. And so, like, and that's why I see so many people on Facebook, especially like old people I used to go to high school with in my very like
Facebook.
old school town. I like just very hateful opinions and um, uh, an inability to kind of recognize that maybe they could be part of the problem and not being able to have that self-awareness that allows them to say, yes, I am, so now what? And that's what I think a lot of people in this country can't do. They can't look at a problem and say, okay, maybe I'm part of that problem.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
they assume that the problem must be elsewhere, and if you're saying that it's them, then you must be completely invalid in all of your arguments because I know I'm not racist, so I think you're just misdefining racism. And then
exactly. And that's a misconception in itself. You don't have to be like, it's not just a fight against racists. It's a fight against inaction. It's a fight against not supporting the fight against racism, right?
Mhm,
Because just like World War II, for example, the United States was trying to be neutral. They didn't want to fight, but they was trying to supply arms here, supply arms there. As a neutral white person, I'm trying to kick it with my racist friend here, trying to kick it with my minority friend there. It doesn't work that way. You got to pick a side. You can't be with that side and still try to mess with your minority groups. That's disingenuous. You're not really their friends, and that is a mindset that the Black Lives Matter movement has been pushing, and it's being received by the world because everyone is disgusted. And leading up to your point in terms of this boiling point, right? The thing that I fear the most about this boiling point of violence, of civil war, civil unrest, is that, really, I don't think that the minority community, people of color, and people who support our allies are prepared or equipped to, stand a chance, really. Because when we think of, white supremacists or just white racists, first thought may be Southerner or just people in these Southern areas, etc. Although that's not the extent. That's just a stereotype. But another stereotype is in terms of making this political, right? All lives matter, Black lives matter. Somebody getting fired from Wendy's for wearing Black Lives Matter because it's a political statement. Left versus right, Democrats versus Republicans. Republicans believe in gun rights. Republicans have guns, especially right wing Republicans, and especially white supremacists, because they, I think, have been ready for this civil war, for this boiling point, for this race war for the longest
They
time.
never left theirs. They're still in the Confederacy, bro. Like
Exactly. They
pretend
never left. They've been
just
waiting to get their leg back.
yeah. They're
For
just waiting for the next opportunity. And
exactly.
honestly, Trump, you look at Trump, he's providing them that opportunity. You start a civil war by creating unrest between your own people.
Mhm.
And then when there's just so much polarization within that unrest that you can't even have a conversation or even come to the table anymore, that's when it turns into a civil war. And it
And
just takes one shot.
yeah, and
Take
those aren't just symptoms of a civil war, right? It's symptoms of early on dictatorships,
yeah.
right? Because America has always been proud to be a democratic, country where voting matters. And early on, Trump, there's been a lot of concerns raised because he admires dictators, and and he abuses his power often, and you get the sense that that's what he really strives for because his administration runs off unrest, runs off dividing, right? And he's already picked a side. So, like you said, if this happens under his administration, best believe there's going to be martial law that are attacking one side more than the other and protecting the
He
other.
was shooting people with rubber bullets and tear gas to get to a photo op at a church. Imagine what he would do if you actually tried to attack him.
Yeah, did you hear the blackout in Washington when the protesters were in Washington, they were trying to storm or surround the White House, and there was a blackout, and and several text messages got sent by the protesters that were eerily similar, saying, "I'm okay and I'm home," or something like that. Oh, don't worry, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. But a lot of people went missing after that blackout, and there are reports from people who were on the scene that they sent out police and they were shooting people and shit like that, and that really hasn't been covered a lot in the media. So I think that worst case scenario, it could definitely get there and it wouldn't favor the minority community, like worst case or middle case scenario, because I don't think that we don't want this. We nobody wants to. I don't want to be a soldier. Like I don't want to fucking
Nobody wants to fight the U.S. Army. It's the freaking U.S. Army. It's the
yeah,
next 10 countries' armies combined into one.
exactly. Not even the U.S. Army. I don't want to fight a group of white supremacists, the
Yeah,
KKK.
I
Like
want to kill
that's
your
not my
countrymen.
dream. You know
Of
what I
course,
mean? Like even protesting, just going on a protest is really hard enough just for me. And I imagine for many people of color because I don't want this. I don't want to like if I'm just trying to say, hey, I'm equal. I don't want to have to make a sign and be surrounded by mad people under coronavirus and
yeah,
then just say, hey, my life matters, and then stare down at a cop that might do anything to me, knowing what cops have done. Like
yeah.
we don't want this at all. So it's white supremacists who really want this, who want this race war, which is why I worry and I hope it never leads up to that because I don't think we would win at all because we don't want to fight and and yeah, man, we don't
No,
want this at all.
I agree. The average person, you don't want to fight your fellow American because why would you? That's your fellow American. But I had the same concerns you did about the protests. Especially with coronavirus. I This was probably the first series of protests where I didn't attend a protest, probably in like 5 years, and that's solely because I didn't want to put myself and my family at risk for the coronavirus, even though I very, very, very much believed in the movement and wanted to be a part of it, I figured the best I could do, I sat home, I donated, I posted on social, I tried to educate the people around me the best I could, but it consistently feels like I'm not doing enough. And I want to do more, but it doesn't seem like there's more to do until I get to a level where I can create the change that I want to make. Like I can't ask 50 people to all get together and make up their mind on what my opinion and go with my opinion. But what I can do is rise above 50 people and tell them that that's the way it is. So I'd rather do that, make the change. Like I think my days of, like you said, going in front of a cop who's not going to listen to me screaming that, Black Lives Matter or whatever else I'm trying to support, it's not as effective as what I believe I can do in the future. And I think I'm sort of investing and gambling on myself to put myself in a position in the future that will give me the authority and give me the power to create these social changes at a level that I've never been able to do before. And that's why right now I'm kind of just focusing on, professionally, who can I get to know? What can I do to increase my wealth so that I can pass that wealth down to Black Americans who haven't had the opportunities that I have? And how can I change the social structures once I get to a position of power? Like right now, I'm just spending a lot of time educating myself, figuring out if I ever have the opportunity, what can I do? And that's really the goal right now is figuring that out so that when I do get to that position of power, which I will, I can do it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that, right now under quarantine, because of the coronavirus, you know, there are many forms of protest. So going out and putting yourself at risk, especially if you have family members that, might, have some health issues that might endanger them, then you shouldn't do it. And you shouldn't feel guilty if you don't go out and protest under coronavirus, because there are many ways to support and many ways to be an ally, such as donating, such as educating your own community that may be have their own views. And, as you said, just educating yourself, right? Um, outside of coronavirus, though, if there wasn't any coronavirus, I think it's most important for allies to protest, to be the ones there.
I would have, if there was no coronavirus, I 100% would have been there. But I think this was the first like instance of me not going to a protest solely because of coronavirus. Like that was
Yeah,
this is my first. Like I don't know. I've always thought of protests of like there's nothing more important to me right now than going to this protest because I believe in this fight. But in this exact instance, it was like I really believe in this fight, but I also really believe that I do not want to get my family sick.
yeah. I definitely got that point. What I was trying to say was that the difference between a black protester and a white protester or an ally is a white cop may be looking at somebody that reminds them of their son, saying, or their daughter or their friend, saying, "Hey, these lives matter," and that may have a different effect on them in terms of that. And I've noticed, and this has surprised me, right? Seeing just this police brutality affect white people to the extent that it has been
Mhm.
now, that's the one thing that surprised me in terms of they're attacking women, they're attacking old men, children. Like I expect all of that for the black community, whatever. Shouldn't be surprised. But the seeing that on the other side, I think it made, me realize and white people realize that have seen this, that wait a minute, this is not just, you know, a fight for black people or for minority people. It's a fight against a system. And the
Yeah.
system sees, if there's anything that sees no color, it's a system in terms of, or rather they see an enemy, right? Because if you're an ally under that system, you're now an enemy, at least to the police,
Yeah.
um, and shit like that. So I found that really, really interesting, man.
And also as an ally, I will say like, people who grew up in communities like me where the cops, I've never had a bad run with a cop. I've never had a bad instance with a cop or thought of cops negatively. Like when white people will tend to join movements and you're saying fuck the police and you've never had a bad instance with the police, you're now kind of you're against a perceived enemy, not necessarily your own enemy.
Yeah,
And I think now honestly, the police brutality as it's tragic. It's awful that it happened, but it did a good thing in the sense of waking up America to say, look, yes, police brutality is rooted deeply in racism, but this is a problem that literally all of us should be worried about is overt police power because that's how dictatorships start. And as a democracy, as the people of a democracy, it's our duty to make sure that we're calling that out and making sure it doesn't overtake our society. That's our goal. Like, the only way to maintain a democracy is to keep the people involved. And right now, there's so much misinformation and so much disconnect between being able to just be a person in this country and being a very active member in protest or any other movement. Like, you feel like there's such a far distance to go to get there, but realistically we're all fighting the same battle, we're all just doing it in our own ways. So when it feels like it's hard to join a protest, it's because you haven't quite identified your enemy. But I think now the police have made it a bit easier for us to identify our enemy, and it's the police system. It's not
Yeah,
cops, it's not that person's dad or that person's sister or you. It's the policing system. You can still be a cop. We just want you to be a cop under a better system that doesn't hurt American people.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's really a lot of things are broken, and we're just seeing how broken it is in all aspects. It's always been broken, but like you said, America's waking up. There's been several instances throughout American history where Americans have woken up, and each wake up really has led to a certain degree of change.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, yeah, as you mentioned. Now, moving on, I want to move on to a separate topic because that was really heavy, and I think it was. I really enjoyed that because it was a different perspective. Um, but speaking of, you're mentioning that you're going to put yourself in these positions of power where you can be an effective ally in terms of being having the power to bring direct change or direct aid within the movement or within the system. And I know that you're an entrepreneur. You're embarking on you had several companies that you started in Syracuse University, and within each of those endeavors you learned something, even if they may not have gone all the way. And your most recent one, I've seen, I think is your most successful one thus far because you're growing, you're building a team, and growth is the biggest indication of success. So really, just for those who don't know, what is Smarta, and how was the experience being a CEO for a team?
Yeah, so Smarta, not to get into too much detail because we're kind of in the midst of changing up our business model a bit, but our goal is to make the leasing process for everybody, specifically students, more efficient and more informational. Um, I'll have more details as we continue to grow as a company, and I can actually share those.
Details and developments will be shared as we move on. But yeah,
but as far as my perspective from growing this company, like you said, I've built a lot of companies back in the day, and they've all proved to not be very fruitful. And that was because of individual issues, be it broken supply chain or a market that isn't quite ready for the technology or whatever it may be. And this is the first company where it looks like the market's really ready for what we're building. We understand our product. We really believe that there's an opportunity here. So we've been growing at the rate we have because people are seeing the confidence that we have in what we're building, and they're giving us the funds and the resources in order to build a company that can meet those needs and demands.
right.
So what's been very interesting to me so far is has been the experience of building a team and managing a team, especially from somebody like, I'm an IT student. I understand technology from a very systems perspective and like being able to understand the nuances of technology. But things like leading a development team, leading a marketing team, reporting to investors, I had never done any of that before. So I will say that it was very stressful. The hiring process for my team, very stressful because we had 300 applicants that I had to narrow down to two. And that was a lot because there's very small differences that people have, and interviews played a big role in that because I'm a big personality type of person. So if I can discuss with you like we always do, and I can have a good conversation with you, then it's likely that I can work really well with you. And so that played a big role. But it was learning the way that I wanted to handle interviews, and it was learning how other people may perceive my company from an outsider's perspective and how I can manage that. It's been a very interesting trip, and I've loved every second of it. It's been stressful. It's been very rewarding though, but it's fun to kind of throw myself out there and force myself to learn new things. Because when I graduated college, I told myself I really didn't want to work for anybody because I had been working part-time jobs since I was in high school. And while I'm grateful for every single job I've ever had, I got sick of just listening to somebody else tell me to do something for a reason that I can't quite know, or a reason that I'm not quite high enough on the scale to understand or need to know. And I want to be the person that makes the tasks, that makes the reasoning, that drives the business model. And I've always been that way. And I think now that I'm out of college, I had a decision of whether I was like, I could either work for somebody and make good money because I had job offers where I could have been making really good money over this past year, or I can invest that lost opportunity in myself and say that my opportunity to become a CEO of a very successful and wealthy company is worth the time off that I'm giving myself that I could be making money at a job. And so far, I'm extremely happy with my decision. The company's growing, my team is motivated. I am excited for the next step in this process and really getting out there and try to start selling our product. So it's been a very roller coaster esque but fun time since I graduated college, really trying to just get the idea for Smarta off the ground and just working it through.
Yeah, yeah. These are the times of investment, right? Um, you know, after graduation, after you leave the bubble of undergrad and college, and start adulting, as you mentioned, shit starts getting a little real, and you have to realistically think, in order to make some actionative success, or achieve anything really. Every for me to get from one block to another, there are a lot of steps. I don't count those steps.
Yeah.
But in active, you know, investment, you have to count those steps, and you can't miss any. You can't miss any steps, otherwise it'll fuck you up down the line. You'll trip on something, right? So, that's something that I've also been, realizing and just going through in my head, like just in terms of, peeling off the naivety of being optimistic.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that being pessimistic is better, but being optimistic and realistic is very hard. You have to be unbiased. You have to be you have to look at evidence, right? For example, with my podcast, right? My goal with this podcast is not focused on growth, right? It's focused on networking, it's focused on conversation and providing a platform for discourse and just opening up a perspective, right? But
Mhm.
if growth was my only focus, you know, just I can't, just promote my podcast online on social media and just expect optimistically, all my followers are gonna subscribe and all my friends are gonna subscribe and shit like that. No, there's steps that I'd have to take. I'd have to, open up accounts, different accounts, market, do some, you know, marketing schemes, marketing campaigns, and look at each of those campaigns individually and see what's working, and be aware, track each step, and be thankful for each step because each step matters, right?
Yeah. And like that's the biggest mistake that I've seen in my years of working with entrepreneurs and mentoring entrepreneurs is people tend to build a product expecting there to be customers. Like, oh, if I build this superior thing, then people will buy it because it's superior. But that's almost never the case. You have to go to the customer, say, what are you missing? What needs do you have that aren't being met by today's market? They'll tell you what the product is. Like people tend to do more work than they actually need to be doing. If you went out and talked to the people that you're going to potentially be selling to, they'll tell you exactly what they need. And you can build that exactly how they're saying it to because that's what they will pay for.
Mm.
So I think that experience of honestly learning how to be a better boss, be a better strategist, and going out and having like I mean, even in the beginning of this, I can't tell you too much about Smarta. One, because I don't want to give too much information away, but two, because my customer base could tell me something different in a couple of weeks. And you know, we're still a developing product, and there may be more features or a different marketing angle that I don't quite know yet. You know,
Mhm.
there's the unknown unknowns, and you can't plan for them. You just have to plan to face them and
Yeah.
understand that in your timeline, there's going to be setbacks and there's going to be changes of opinion and of thought and of the process that you just have to ride along or you fail. You know, you were saying before, there's that like brush of naivety that you kind of take off when you leave college and become an adult. And part of that when you're running a business is, you know, if you mess up, usually you used to have a boss that would check you and say, "Oh, don't submit that. You have this," or you'd have somebody else that kind of checked your work. If you do something wrong when you own your own business, nobody's checking your work for you unless you have systems in place to check it for you. But at the end of the day, the decision that the company made comes down on you. Everything the company does. So in respect to your podcast, you know, you upload a bad video one day, or you upload a video that you didn't mean to upload to YouTube, and I have to deal with the repercussions of that. That's all you. You are the only person that can deal with that, and that's a bit of a step out of like your comfort zone that I think a lot of people need to take because it really teaches you how to adjust to certain situations and certain problems, even when you didn't prepare a solution for them. And that's a very valuable skill that I think I've picked up over the past year.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you've picked up just through the process of developing this podcast and talking with people every week or so. And there's just a lot of value in that, a lot of value in being able to make, create a solution to a problem that hasn't existed yet.
Yes, exactly, exactly. You have to, learn from your mistakes, recognize you are going to make mistakes, but also be open, right? The reason why Smart is going through under different developments now is because you're making a change, and you're making an adjustment in terms of the timeline of where the company's going, right? Coming into this podcast, although my goal isn't growth, like I'm not actively trying to grow. That doesn't mean I'm gonna hinder myself from growth, and I'm not gonna provide the tools that I need in order to grow. I could have just done this and left it at YouTube, but I'm planning to get this on Apple, on Spotify, just providing, nurturing it and, putting it out there to grow. I even have another channel that's a lot more successful than my podcast that is growing very quickly. And the reason I have that channel is to help this grow, but it's also to help everything else that I'm gonna work on grow. Like I have many plans that I want to act on and do. And time flies. Time flies. That's another thing that I've learned post grad. Right, Syracuse feels like it went by really quick, but at the same time, and it felt like a long time. It felt like the right amount of time,
Yeah.
and it was great, and it was great for me because I was able to surround myself with a community that I can trust, with a group of friends that I can trust, and really shielded me from a lot of the bullshit and racism that happens in Syracuse.
Mhm.
Post grad though, if oh, I want to create a podcast, and then you fuck around for 3 months, nothing's done yet. Oh shit, 3 months already passed. Like it's very easy for time to go by if you're not actively working. That's the importance of just the steps analogy of counting each step and keeping track of each step. Because if you pause and start walking sideways, those are steps as well, but you're not moving forward, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So so yeah, man, regardless of, however long it takes and however many years you put in, as long as you're moving forward, I know for a fact you're gonna be successful because it's in your genes, man. You've done these companies again and again and again, and a failure with a company isn't a step back because your steps moving forward are even lighter now because you know a lot more.
It's a lesson
I'm
learned.
killing the step analogy thing. I'm
It's,
just, I'm, I
I
didn't
love
write this beforehand. Like I'm finding new ways to incorporate it. That's part of innovation, guys. I did it again. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop. But you get what I'm trying to say. Like just move forward. really. I think that's very necessary and important to do
Yeah, and a
because
lot of people,
yeah,
they tend to have those failures, be it a business or be it a personal failure, and it's an unfortunate trap that I've put myself into too, to be upset about it, to be worried about the failure that you just endured, because failure can be viewed from two different lenses. It can be viewed as a failure to accomplish a goal, but it could also be, and this is the way I like to look at it, a lesson learned on how you achieve that goal next time.
right.
And so every business that I've failed, like I said before, a broken supply chain or new technology that wasn't quite ready for the market yet, like it taught me, timing in the market. It taught me how to manage a supply chain and to recognize when it can't be built. And those little lessons, while they don't come into play every single day of my life, when the situation arises, I'm that much more prepared. And I found myself to be much more prepared in the process of building Smarta than I ever had in any business previously. And it's been rewarding to look back on my failures and say, oh, I remember when I messed that up 3 years ago. Don't worry, I got this. That's a great feeling for me because I know exactly what I'm doing because of how badly I messed it up the first time. And I won't mess it up again because I've remembered that failure, absorbed it, and understood why it happened and what I can do better next time.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Just speaking like in terms of with myself, where I started, and where I want to go, right? Coming into America as an immigrant when I was 7, just that point was it took a lot just to get there. Not for me, but for my parents
Mhm.
who went through their life. Like my dad growing up in Mozambique, he grew up in times of civil war. So walking to school was a danger, was anything could have happened at any time. And he survived that. He pursued his education, got with my mom, and they hustled and went through some struggle, moved to different countries just to go to a better education system, because America and Europe, they have these great educational systems, and China and Asia and things like that. But there are several countries that don't. So as a result, in order to get the most you can, you may have to travel. And my parents did that. And all the sacrifice and success that they had led up to this point, right? It's sort of being in America and then living under America for myself, but better opportunity. We're all citizens. And now it's my torch to pass. Like, of course, my parents are still trying to make moves. My dad right now is trying to get into real estate back in his home country, which is great. And it empowers me to do better as well. But I recognize,
Real estate, as a little sidebar,
yeah,
always invest in real estate. 90% of millionaires make their millions by investing in real estate. 90%. Just a
correct.
little sidebar there. Just wanted to throw that out there for the listeners.
Correct, exactly. My dad's been holding off on his real estate investment because he's been prioritizing my education. So it's now he's like, all right, now is the time. I'm done holding off. I need to start planting the seeds now. And he's doing it back in our home country because he owns several lands. So he needs to start building because after owning land, it's not enough.
Yeah,
Unless you're trying to license it or whatever. You need to actually build something. And that's what would lead to real success, right? So, with this aspect, this part of my life now, I'm looking at my torch and the steps that I need to take. And that's when the layering of naivety, came in place, like realizing like, okay, this is where I'm at, regardless of why I'm here, regardless of the opportunities that I have due to the system that's in place. That's just reality, right? You know, systematic, disproportionate. I may have to apply to 200 jobs before getting one because of whatever reason.
mhm.
But that doesn't mean I'm not going to apply. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get the job. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to accept being stuck. Like, that's one thing I've never been able to do. I've never been able to accept being stuck. Like, being laid off because of under quarantine, it made a lot of people stuck, and a lot of people are stuck, and they may not feel up to just pursuing different things and applying or whatever because of just the climate in general. It's fucked up. And for those people, if that's your process and you know yourself most. If that's what's going to lead you to be mentally, healthy, I applaud that. But for the other people that feel stuck and want to get out of that, suggest start a YouTube channel, do something. You know what I mean? Start selling some clothes, just or try, learn about it and act on it, because that is always helpful. Like my start now with my YouTube channels and before I started when I was laid off is vastly different. Like I've gotten a lot of job offers, you know, in these past 2 months. I've rejected all of them because they're not the right ones for me.
Yeah.
And I have that luxury because I'm pursuing other things that make me happy. And I'm not gonna cut that short or take time out of that for something that I know for a fact is not worth my time and will not make me happy. So, I think, there's just that mindset of I'm not going to be stuck. This is how I'm going to move forward. Even when this particular, path is cut off, I'm going to create another one and continue taking more steps. Again, with the step analogy. but but yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
No, I mean, and that's just a good attitude to have because, and of course, I've also seen the flip side of that mentality because there's people during quarantine that are saying to themselves, "Oh, I'm stuck in the house all day. I'm not doing enough." And, there is a global pandemic going on. There are racial tensions in our country. Trump's still president. Like, you shouldn't be feeling comfortable every day. This is an uncomfortable time for all of us. And to pretend like you have to be behaving a certain way or have to be productive to a certain capacity, like it's just a non-starter. And I forget what does Vanessa call it? Oh yeah, grind porn. Like just like, oh yeah, I love the idea of waking up at 4 a.m., spending my whole day working and then going to sleep.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, like, that's not a life. You're not living. You're going through the motions. So, I think what this country particularly as like a society we have to do better is prioritizing passions and goals rather than money. Because money can be part of a goal, it can be part of a passion, but it shouldn't be the only driver. And I think that while I'm a capitalist, I love the capitalistic system, but what I dislike about it is the government is supposed to be, or at least is meant to be, a sort of check on that financial system to ensure that the money is being placed strategically, to ensure people aren't left for dead if they lose their job. But it hasn't caught up to that yet. So that's why you find people that are working in jobs just because they need money or just because they need an opportunity or they need benefits. It shouldn't be that way. It should be, you know, I love making YouTube videos. Why can't I spend my life making YouTube videos? Yes, you should be required to turn that into a profitable venture. And if you can't, I'm sorry. But if the person's if that person's YouTube channel fails, there should be some backup option. There has to be a safety net for the American people to bounce back from and say, okay, that didn't work. Next. That didn't work. Next. Because otherwise, you're incentivizing failure more than you are success because you're not giving them the tools to break out of failure. So once you're in that system of failure, then you're not getting out. And that's the problem in this country is we need people like you and I who are motivated by our passions to have a better safety net. And I'm not saying that for my own personal reasons. I'm happily very comfortable in my position right now, but there are many people that aren't. And there's many people that want to start a business that are stuck working 60-hour work weeks for $12 an hour.
Mhm.
And they just want to start a company, a hardware store down the street or an ice cream parlor down the road. And they can't because they don't have this financial safety to do so in this country. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of merit behind incentivizing people to follow passions. And I think that that would help with the mental health issue. I think it would help with the inequality among classes in this country. It would help with a lot of different things. It's a systematic problem that if you solved one aspect of it, it could actually play a role in many other aspects of our society. So I don't know. I honestly don't know what brought up that conversation to me. I think it was you were talking about the YouTube channel, but I just wanted to get that off because I
Mhm.
see it so often that people are sacrificing a good life for themselves and a happy life for themselves for the sake of a job and for the sake of an income. And
Yes.
it saddens me to see that it does.
Yeah. what made you bring that up was when I was speaking of I'm not me rejecting these job offers because I'm not going to take time away from my passion in order to do something that I know I won't be happy with,
Yeah.
right? And as you mentioned, even when I was working, it just dawned on me like, okay, I have this job or whatever. This is nowhere near where I want to be, or my definition of success. Like, yes, I have a job. Kudos to me. I'm making above the average in the country. Kudos to me. But I'm ambitious. This is nowhere near where I want to go. But even then, whether I go to Chipotle or whether I'm just shopping and I'm seeing these workers here who are sort of stuck in a way. Maybe not all of them, but I'm seeing like people who are a lot older than me in these positions, and I'm just like, wow, like that mindset right there in terms of I'm just doing this job to get by. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I'm doing this job because I have to, because I feel stuck. And a lot, some of it, is justified. Like, hey, you have no other options. You're doing what you got to do. I applaud that. But I hope that you're not doing what you got to do forever. I hope you have a backup plan, as you mentioned. And to the other people who just feel stuck, yes, feel stuck, but get yourself out of that situation. If you have to have that job in order to pay your bills and make rent, yes,
Or
have that job.
even if one step in the process of getting to your ambitious goal too.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Kevin Hart was speaking on that. Just do what you got to do to get to the next level, and save up a little at a time. Make some sacrifices here and there to really put yourself in a better position to get out of the cycle of where you are. Because what me getting that first job out of college, that's not an accomplishment. It's I didn't do anything special, I guess. If you consider going to college special, which that's a whole different argument, right? But a lot of people like go to college, and you know a lot of the average salary is the average salary for a reason. And it's not only because people don't go to college. I think it's really just the mindset there, because on my path to my first job, I rejected a lot of offers, a lot, because I had a certain standard for myself that, all right, if this is where I'm going to start, this is where I'm going to start. And I'm not going to compromise that. And it could have been easy for me to take a little less and, but that would just make my path harder. Right. So, just that realization there, I completely agree, with just, you know, just understanding that it's okay to really not move forward financially as quickly as some people you see on social media or some people you see online. You don't know where they started or what steps they took in order to get where they are. Um, that's another layer of just taking out naivety. Like, if I do this like them, I'm gonna end up like them. Like, no, everyone has their own path.
yeah. I mean, people who are multi-millionaires and billionaires, they're not 21, 22. I mean, some of them are, but
Yeah.
most of them are 40, 50, 60, because it takes a while to make that much money, no matter what position you're in, unless you get lucky or unless you sell a business for a substantial fund or whatever else it may be. So I think people assuming that they need to be in a certain place in their life at a certain time to get to a certain destination, it's a system that's broken because that doesn't really exist in this country anymore. Anything can happen. Look at coronavirus. Millions of people. What is it, 11.8 million people now file for unemployment? Like,
Yes,
that's
sir.
crazy. That's an insane amount of people that now have no job, no income besides unemployment payments. They probably all had a plan. Mike Tyson said it best. Yeah, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And you just never know when that punch in the face is going to happen. So I think people need to learn to take that risk a bit more often, to take that leap of faith, to invest in themselves and stop investing in the system that's keeping them below themselves, but rather invest in themselves to get to an ambitious goal that they know they wanted to achieve and they can achieve if they just took even the slightest risk out of their livelihood, their normal everyday to day actions. Yeah.
Yeah, and that varies from environment, right? Because in
It
living in
definitely
New York
does.
City, you know, the levels of jobs available there are more jobs available, but there are also more requirements for these jobs, right? Of course, we all know the jokes about, what an entry level job is, 2 years experience, and etc. That's really something that's emphasized in New York City. So success for me may be, oh, maybe I'll apply to this place. Like, am I willing to move to this place? Like in quarantine, a lot of jobs are remote now, thankfully, and I can apply to a lot more places. But when it's over, what steps am I willing to take to reach the level I want? Am I willing to move here and do this job here and
You
shit
know, I
like
want
that?
to bring something up actually
Yeah,
because I have a bit of a controversial opinion that I came across this opinion the other day when I was talking to somebody, and I may lose some fans in this conversation, but I wanted to ask you.
yeah,
Let's say you're in New York and you're struggling to pay rent. Even you have a job full time, but you're only getting paid, 12.50 an hour. It's not enough to cover your rent and your living expenses and whatever else it may be. You're getting a little sad in your time, in your days. You're just going through the motions, and then all of a sudden, in the Midwest, let's say South Dakota, a great paying job opens up. Rent you can afford, utilities you can afford, food you can afford. Do you think that the person who doesn't move to South Dakota to take that job is irresponsible because they keep their livelihood? And let's say they're actively on Facebook and they're complaining about how much money they're making and how they're not making enough and how life is against them. And yet they're choosing actively to not go to that job in South Dakota where they could be financially comfortable and likely socially comfortable because of the financial comfortability. What do you think about that? Like, do you think that that person's in the wrong, or do you think that they're justified in their desire to stay in New York City and expect everyone else to do, not everyone else, but expect other people to give them more money, give them more opportunity?
right. Yeah, yeah. I think that question is layered. It's not so black and white, but I definitely see what you're getting at, and it's similar to what I was getting at. So that person, right? Let's say that person is a minority person, like minority individual. There's a lot more to think about, like,
That's
because
very
I've thought of that really constantly, especially now, right? If I wasn't living in New York City, because of how diverse it is, I would have to be a lot more worried than I am now, right? Because
so
obviously,
let me change it from South Dakota to Austin, Texas.
okay,
A bit more
gotcha.
diverse, but same kind of mentality.
I got you. But that's not the reality in terms of just the country, in terms of New York City being diverse. But for the sake of your argument, I'm just going to say a city. They live in a
Okay.
city, and they have an opportunity to move out to a place that I guess they wouldn't prefer to live, right? But they would be comfortable, and yeah, I would say it depends on that. If that person's goal is to move up financially, then yes, they are definitely being irresponsible. I wouldn't say irresponsible, but hypocritical or something along the lines of that nature.
I can never quite get the word either. So yeah,
Yeah, because because just think strategically, right? A move is not permanent. It's only as long as you are, right? If like for me, I value resume building, right?
mhm.
That's why I'm not just going to take any offer. I want to build my resume as well. And part of that means getting in that door. So if you're in a position, especially if you're making a minimum wage, 15 an hour, or just you know not a lot of money, right, below the average, and you have big goals that you want to reach, income, money, bank is always the talk, baby, no matter where you at. So if you get that job offer and it's very reasonable, it's within where you'd want, 60 up, 65, k and shit, and it provides you the position to build up your resume and build up your economic portfolio. You can move back to the city after you're qualified to make 80k, 80 plus, and shit like that, or you can move to another area. You know what I mean? Just for me, when I think of that, it's really that concern of that, like, okay, where would I move and what would that environment be for me, racially speaking, and just with police speaking. Because Thankfully in my life, I haven't had a lot of experience with police, but that could be a good and a bad thing, right? I'm like, I don't have experience teaches. So, but at the same time, not someone may have one experience with the cops and it'll end up bad.
That's what I mean. Like, I was just gonna say, like, as many experiences you have can't prepare you for the one. I don't even
Correct.
say bastard cop, but that's too harsh. That
Correct.
just
Correct. And and just like I've never lived. I mean, I guess Syracuse counts, but you know, I've never been in an area.
not quite sure what Syracuse is. If it's a
Yeah,
city, if it's I don't know. Syracuse is
it's,
confusing.
it's a bubble, but I've never been in an area where I'm just surrounded by predominantly white people, and I'm just the only black person at all times, right? I've had classes where I've been maybe the only black person, lectures, but just living in that, I don't know how would react to that, or how that would affect my mental happiness in terms of what I experienced there. And that's my biggest factor in not taking that South Dakota job. But that's something that I'm considering changing, just because, like, why not? Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, if this is my goal, there's always risk, there's always sacrifice. And being black in New York City, you know, might be safer, but there's still risk there in itself.
Yeah,
So it's really in terms of, I know myself, I know how I react. I'm very calm for a reason. I just talked about it on my last podcast. What sparked my calm character? And I think it's just not being perceived as a threat, because that's how black people are perceived. And I know myself well enough that I will never overreact in any situation. So, to your question, yeah, I'd say go for it. If you're that person, go for it, man. You got to make your moves. You got to do what you got to do.
yeah. Because I always thought about that from like I forget who I was talking to about it the other day, but I felt like I wanted to bring it up with you because like I had this opinion of if you're in the city, and I didn't take race into account at all, so I'm going to say that as a disclaimer. A bit, there you go, ignorance, but or privilege, I should say. But I my mentality was, if you're gonna live in New York City where the rent is 1,500 a month on minimum in a shoebox of an apartment with nothing going for you and terribly like that's what I picture New York as, and that's because that's been my experience in New York.
Right.
You can get some really nice places, but they're expensive, and it costs money to live in New York and to have those experiences that you're going to. So essentially, I see it as an investment in going to an area that you may not want to live in, but you can go there, save up money, put yourself in a financially comfortable position so that you can go back and fulfill your New York City dream. But now you can do it financially comfortable, enjoying the luxuries you always pictured yourself doing. Like, I never understood the mentality of, oh, I'm in New York City, I'm not making money, I don't have a good job outlook here, let me just stay here.
Yeah.
No, go somewhere else for a bit. Go somewhere. There's so many places in this country you can your salary, even if it stayed exactly the same, you'd be making much more money on that because your living expenses are so much or so significantly less.
Yes.
So I don't want to call it lazy and I don't want to call it irresponsible, but I do think that like there should be a more social pressure to a degree, or at least social programs that incentivize moving away from a high cost area if you're not making too high of an income, and giving you opportunities to go to a lower cost of living area so that you can make more money on your salary.
Yeah.
Like
It's
I think that
it's
we as a country should be incentivizing that. We should be like
yeah.
telling people it's a
It's really
good thing.
just it's really just changing your priorities, right? Because during
Yeah.
this time, our prime, right? It's we're focused on, okay, nightlife, etc. Like, in this environment with this job, fuck, I'm living in bubble fuck. There's nothing to do here, right? But it's not that layered. Like, there's so many parts of the country, of just outside cities, that, have both, or, have close enough. If you live a 20 minutes drive from a town, that's close enough.
Mhm.
Find a way to get there, find a way to get there safely without driving drunk, and have your fun. but live where you live, build yourself up, and then with that building provides freedom in order to do what you want to do. And that's something that I 100% agree with, and something that I myself will need to consider moving forward,
You
and
can always move up here to
am
Syracuse.
and am considering.
It's cheaper up here. You can always move here.
Yeah, I'm gonna look into anywhere. I'm open to anywhere really now, except the fucking Georgia's. I don't know, like like crazy
Yeah, a
places.
lot of the South scares me. I try to avoid that. Austin, Texas is my one little like diamond in the rough place in the South, but everywhere else honestly scares me,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
shouldn't be scared at all.
yeah. I'm just like no matter how calm I am, I'm not ready to fucking look at a swastika and just be attacked for no reason. I don't need that in my life.
No,
But
no one needs that.
yeah, but we're coming. We've been talking for a while, so I don't want to make the podcast too long because we could
Gotcha.
talk forever. um, yeah. So as you already know, towards the end of my podcast, I have a storyline going through. A man walks into a bar.
And then he woke up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the dope conversation. I really enjoyed this one because we got into a lot of things that I didn't think we were gonna get into. Just it brought up because it was social, but at the same time, it wasn't. I've been having social conversations a lot throughout my podcast. So this one was refreshing because I learned a little bit more about the cool white people's perspective in terms of the non-racist white people perspective. Because I know it's a small struggle to to have a whole you know, drastic or radical group of white people that may represent you and misrepresent you is what I mean in terms of your actual thoughts and feelings because everyone is an individual. But it was really nice gaining some insight on that and on mental health and everything that we talked about.
Yeah, great conversation, man. Thank you for having me. Really.
Yeah, it was dope. All right, I'm gonna end the podcast. Thanks for having me, man.